this is Navajo Bridge when it was built in 1929. And you may notice that they're calling it Grand Canyon Bridge. Well, that was the original name. Wasn't a very good name because after all, it's not over the Grand Canyon. Some people suggested they call it Lee's Ferry Bridge, because that's the reason it went in. But boy, the Utah delegation didn't like that much. So for reasons I'll mention in a few minutes. So it was kind of settled on Navajo Bridge. And after all, the east end of the bridge is on the res. So that's a good name. Now I like talking about the plaques. I think of them as little slices of history, and they really help me connect with this environment that we live in here, like so much. So this is the visitor area at Navajo Bridge. Most of what you're seeing, particularly on the right side, is all new. That was put in with the expansion of the bridge. The new bridge was built in 1995, and the visitor area put in as well. Now over on the left, you can see some of the old stonework that was put in by the Civilian Conservation Corps starting about 1937. They've done a good job matching the rock, but if you pay attention, you can tell which is the old and which is the new. So we're going to start by going under that roof structure there and look at this first plaque, the first plaque that was put up in this vicinity. This is not the original location, but I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. This is the Norm and Doris Nevills plaque put up in their honor. They died in 1949 in Mexican hat. They were young. They were taking off in a little Piper Cub from the dirt strip at Mexican hat. They'd just taken off, the engine failed, and they crashed. Norm is really the first commercial river runner, and he started running river trips. Aha.
Where the press was.
Yeah, really. The press has arrived. Made it. Yeah. So Norm was really the first commercial river runner. Started running commercial trips, taking passengers down from Mexican Hat, down the San Juan to the Colorado and to Lee's Ferry, and then other places as well. He started that about in the late 30s. And a lot of people went down the river with Norm in those days. A lot of the river running community, actually wasn't that many people. If we take a close look at the lower left-hand corner here of this plaque, I've always been amused by the fact the oar hangs over the border. But if we look in the corner right here, this is Mary Ogden Abbott. SC is for sculptor. She's the one who sculpted the plaque. She actually etched her name in here after the plaque went up, or after it was cast rather. And likewise here, the name of the boat, the Wen, was also etched. And then as you go down the edge of the boat, you can see Neville's Expedition. All those features were etched after the bronze was cast.
What year did the lady do the sculpture? Was it right away?
That's actually a good question. Probably about 1950 when this got organized. I'll try to elaborate on that a little bit in just a second. Here's Norm at his boat, the Wen. By the way, the initials on the boat, Wendell something Nevills, that's his father. So the boat's named for his father. But you can see it's really a pretty good representation on the plaque. And so here's Norm in the Grand Canyon. You can see the Black Bridge behind him. So he's here at Boat Beach, not far from Phantom Ranch. So this is the location that the plaque was placed originally. This is a little upstream from the old bridge and along the rim. This photo was taken by Jerry Cannon. He was actually the supervising engineer on the construction of the new bridge. And he had a lot of responsibilities. In addition to the bridge, he expanded the visitor area. And one of his minor duties was to relocate these plaques. So this is what that spot looks like now. You can still see where the plaque was, but we know where it went. And here we're on the old bridge on the west side, looking down, and there's the spot where the plaque was. Did you see that? Did you catch that? Right there. Okay. All right. So there, at one time, from the visitor area, there was a trail down the hill under the bridge and over to this plaque. That trail's been obliterated now. They don't want you to do that sort of thing. So this is the dedication ceremony for this plaque in 1952. The guy standing on the left, that's Frank Maslin. Here, I'm going to advance to this is my memory slide. I put up the names so I can remember. So that's on the left is Frank Maslin. He was a central player in getting this plaque installed. He was a friend of Norm's. He'd gone down the river with him several times. He was a big name in the river running community. And he organized the fundraising for the plaque and actually put up a good deal of money himself. Standing next to Frank is Joan Nevills, Norm Nevills' oldest daughter. And then all the way to the right, that's actually Norm's mother. This photo kind of hides two other women in that picture. Joan Nevills, the younger daughter, and Mary Abbott, the artist. And now, obviously, Mary Abbott had to do this sometime earlier. So I would estimate about 1950. I think this whole process got underway, and I think Frank Maslin actually put up the money so Mary would do the casting. And she was a friend of Norm's too. She'd gone down the river, and she was an appropriate person.
When did he die?
What?
When did he die?
1941.
Okay.
1941.
They got it done pretty quick.
Yeah. I think they were actually pretty efficient. Now there were probably about 200 people that attended this event, and most of them, I think, were hiding under the bridge because it's a hot day. At least a little bit of shade under the bridge. But the Park Service sent a contingent as well. This photo was taken by Steve Letting, a ranger from the South Rim of the Grand Canyon. And I think the Park Service wanted to keep an eye on those crafty river runners. This was the program that was put together on that day. Just a couple of points I want to make about this. And the first one being smorgasbord at Art Green's Cliff Dwellers Lodge. So Art managed to play a major role in this and get his name on it. Of course, when he was a commercial river runner too. He started much later than Nevills, but he was taking people from Lee's Ferry upstream, up Glen Canyon, particularly to Rainbow Bridge, but they went other places. And when the dam went in, of course, he lost that river running business, but he was smart enough to go buy some land on what became the edge of Lake Powell. And he became the first concessionaire in Lake Powell. So he managed to make the transition pretty good.
And Green.
And yes, so thank you, thank you.
Green, yeah.
Greenhaven is obviously that land and named for our green. I like to say Greeny Haven because it reminds me of how it's spelled. And as a joke, at any rate, Barry Goldwater was supposed to be master of ceremonies. We all know about Barry Goldwater, quite a character in Arizona. And I'm not going to say anything more about Norm. You could go on for a couple hours talking about
Does
Norm.
that say gap session?
I believe it does. I believe it does. Yes, Gab session. Yes.
3 hours.
3 hours for the gap session.
Now this is a terrible photo, but you can kind of in the very dark area there, you can kind of make out the Nevills plaque there. The only point I want to make is the next plaque we're going to talk about is this one to the left that's in a little bit of sunshine. And this is the Lovie Reiff plaque. And here she is smoking her corncob pipe. She died in 1958, and her husband, Woody, put this plaque up. And I think he probably scattered her ashes at the same time. I'm not absolutely certain of that, but I believe that's probably the case. Now look down here at the bottom at this Navajo phrase. My wife thinks I should be able to pronounce that, but I don't want all the Navajo speakers to laugh at me, so I'm going to say it's the rough translation is end of the trade.
Did she die on the river?
Here, let's look at her death certificate.
Okay.
Here, she died in California. And she was only 44 years old, and she had a heart attack. You know, in 1958, that's the way men were supposed to die at that age, not women. But I think she smoked quite a bit, and I think smoking contributed. She was born Lovie Westcott in North Carolina, where I think she picked up that habit of smoking the corncob pipe. Her father actually was a lighthouse keeper on Ferry Island, so that's where she grew up, in the lighthouse. However, somewhere along the line, she moved about as far away as you can and still stay in the country. She moved out to LA and she worked dispatch for the Los Angeles Police Department. And that's where she got her husband, who was a policeman. Now, probably the first river trip the Reiffs took down the river, the Glen Canyon River, was with Georgie White. She was from Los Angeles. And he's probably the one that introduced them to Glen Canyon. They loved Glen Canyon, came back whenever they could. This kind of silly document on the left here is this very simple notebook. This was actually what acted as the music temple register back then. And here you can see Woody and D. Reiff, 1955. So on this trip, they probably came from Mexican Hats down the San Juan. And of course, Music Temple was a well-known spot on the river. Many people like to stop, named by Powell.
Where's the path?
Where's the what?
The Music Temple, where's it at? Is it on the San Juan or is it?
It's on the Colorado River below the San Juan confluence. And I think it's on River Left. I kind of forgot.
Yeah.
I've never been there personally.
It's under a lot of water.
Yeah, right now it's under a lot of water. Yeah, that's exactly right. But the Reiffs also happened to go up the river at least once, maybe several times with Art Green, starting at Lee's Ferry and maybe going to Rainbow Bridge, but he went other places too. I've looked for their names in the Rainbow Bridge registry, but I've never found them. Maybe they didn't sign the register, or maybe they didn't hike that far. There are pages missing as well, so who knows? Now, this is the original location that that plaque was in. This doesn't tell you much, except it's somewhere different from where it is now. And again, this is a Jerry Cannon photo of a bridge engineer. This is a horrible photo. This comes from a YouTube video, and that's cut off down here at the bottom, by the way. But this is just a still I took from a YouTube video, just to give you the what this area looked like. So here you were at the old visitor area. There was an ice trail that went down under the bridge, and you can see going down the slick rock here would be really easy. Well, this whole thing has been obliterated. The visitor area has been expanded towards us, and all this fill dumped on top of that slick rock, and they put up these walls so you wouldn't be tempted to try to walk down that slope. And you can see they're definitely discouraging. Now, Woody was a photographer, and he took a lot of photographs on these river trips, and you can see his collection at the Klein Library in Flagstaff, if you're interested, or probably online, most of it. He actually has a couple of videos that aren't online. One has some nice shots of his wife with her pipe. Woody put in 20 years with the Los Angeles police, decided he wanted to do something else. Came out to work for a couple seasons for the Park Service at Lee's Ferry as a seasonal ranger, and then got a job working at the Hatch warehouse, being the manager at the Hatch warehouse. And eventually he ended up working for Art Green when the lake went in. Woody was actually the first manager of the Rainbow Bridge Marina back when there was such a thing. And somewhere along the line, he married Sandy Nevills, the youngest daughter of Norm Nevills. All these river people commingled. Was that a bad way to put it? We're gonna have a little change of pace.
Did Woody end up in Nav?
No,
There's a
I
Reef
think
family.
he has family in Canada.
There is a Reef family. One of them.
Really, I didn't know that. I think he actually lived in Page for a while with Sandy Nevills. I'm not absolutely certain.
The son is Greg and he's in Flagstaff.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's talk about this tall monument here, this 8-foot high thing. I'm gonna give you a little bit of history background. You probably all know this already, but I just want to give you enough background so you have some appreciation for the monument. Mountain Meadows Massacre in 1857. A group of Mormon militia from southern Utah attacked a wagon train on their way to California, and they killed 130 men, women, and children. There were only half a dozen children under 6 years old that they didn't kill. It's a shameful episode. Some people say the cause, what the cause was, was complicated, but some people say one of the causes was the fact that a couple members of the wagon train were bragging about having participated in the assassination of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church. So at any rate, whether that's true or not, I haven't any idea, but there was this event. John D. Lee was identified as the ringleader and was blamed for it. He became a federal fugitive, wanted by the US government. And he was excommunicated from the LDS church. And he became an outcast in this community. That with that excommunication, he became an outcast. He still regarded himself as a good Mormon. And as a matter of fact, in 1871, he was directed by the church to come and settle at what we now call Ferry. And he brought a couple of his wives with him, Emma and Rachel. All right, I had a mental. Emma actually ended up staying at the Ferry and running the place, mostly because Lee was on the move a lot. Being a fugitive made him not want to stay in one place too long. But she had help. She had someone hired specifically to help her on the ferry, James Jackson. Lee was eventually arrested by federal marshals in 1874, tried in Salt Lake City, tried twice, as a matter of fact, and then executed at Mountain Meadows in 1877. Okay, so enough for the history lesson. Let's talk a little bit about this plaque. This is the dedication ceremony at this plaque in 1961. This is Juanita Brooks over here on the left, very fine historian. She was John D. Lee's biographer, and she wrote a very good book on Mountain Meadows. Now, she was not thanked by her community for being, because this was regarded as an episode you shouldn't talk about.
Was he hung or was he?
He was shot. He was
Fired in his foot.
fired in his foot. Fell backwards into his coffin as he was shot.
Who pulled the trigger? Did they?
They had a
state group or was it a federal?
I think it was Army. I think it was. I'm not absolutely certain. I didn't ask you, but I think it was the Army. But Juanita Brooks famously said, "The church I love can stand the truth." I like that quote. She also said, I can't remember the exact quote here, but she said, we will measure the events at Mountain Meadows against the many accomplishments of Mormon pioneers anytime. So she thought it was something that should be talked about openly, obviously. Now I'm going to go to one of my memory slides here again. Standing on the right side, still next to the monument, that's Peggy Gregory. She was a librarian at the Huntington Library in California. She helped Juanita with a lot of her research, and she actually edited at least one of her books, maybe a couple. You know, when you publish, it's really helpful to have a good editor. And then all the way to the right, that's Santa Williamson. Her husband actually took this photograph, and he's a great grandson. And he played a central role in this monument because he led the petitioning of the LDS Church to reinstate Lee, and that happened in 1961. And then the family decided, okay, now that that's happened, we're going to put up this monument. And so he organized the fundraising and actually probably put up a good chunk of the money himself. Now, let's take a close look. See this nice smooth surface? Just note that, because we're going to take a closer look at this surface now. And I want you to notice that. I contend that's a bullet hole. And I think someone pulled up, took a look at this, pulled out their handgun and took a pot shot. And that was their editorial comment. Fine Western tradition of shooting up stuff in the group. And then this is a separate event. These two we know from photographs that these two events happened separately. So this monument was vandalized not only once, but twice. And they were smart to use granite because none of those other monuments would have stood up to this. Now, why isn't that monument at least Ferry? Why is it 5 miles downstream at the bridge? And the fact of the matter is, the Park Service doesn't really like memorial markers. They're happy to put up all sorts of informational markers, but they don't want the area cluttered up with memorials. ADOT, the Arizona Department of Transportation, feels exactly the opposite. And the bridge is their right of way. They have the right to say what happens on the bridge. And their attitude is that memorial markers just increase tourism, so they're happy to put them up. Now you can download this document from the web, and you can see they list several hundred markers all over the state on the highways. So that's why you see all these markers at the bridge. So let's talk about that, the marker all the way over to the right, the small one. This is to Gilbert Hanson, who drowned in Glen Canyon in 1957. Here's the original location of that plaque, down the hill. This spot, of course, has been obliterated now. But again, a photo from Jerry Cannon, the bridge engineer. When I got interested in that Gilbert Hanson plaque, the first thing I did was download his death certificate. That website in the upper right, you can download death certificates that are more than 50 years old in the state of Arizona. It's Arizona Department of Health Services. You can download them for free. You can download this one. You can see that Gilbert Hanson was just 45 years old when he drowned. And there are a couple of other points I want to show about this death certificate. Here's the informant, Elmer Purdyman from Sedona. When I first saw that, I didn't know who he was, but he was a guy who took a lot of river trips down Glen Canyon in the 50s, and often took many people with him. Took Gilbert Hanson several times, as a matter of fact. They became pretty close friends. And then, look, whoops, they must have missed that. Let's see. All right, there we are. And Gilbert was from Batavia, Illinois, and I didn't know where Batavia, I'd never heard of it. So I had to look it up. Well, it's one of those little suburbs outside of Chicago. And I also noticed that there was a Batavia Historical Society. So I dropped him an email and said, "Do you know anything about this guy?" And man, I got a really good response. I think the curator of the Historical Society was really happy to get an interesting question. So in this nice photograph, here's Gilbert Hanson on the right and Purdyman on the left. They were good enough friends that Purdyman actually went out to Batavia and got photographed in the local paper. And just a close-up, nice looking guy. And then some other headlines. So Hanson was a vice president for this furnace electric company. And it was a big deal in Batavia. They were a big employer in town, maybe one of the bigger ones. And so people knew him, knew the family. And he actually ended up marrying the boss's daughter, Helen Furnace. And as it turns out, this is almost off the. In about 1940, Gilbert Hanson designed an electric switch that ended up being built by the Furnace Electric Company. And they did very well during the war, building the switch. And you can see this is a patent application, Hanson Furnace. So this is the Rainbow Bridge Register in 1954. Here's Gilbert Hanson, Batavia, Illinois. I think that drawing under his name, I think that's his. I think he drew that. And then up here, Elmer Purdyman River Rats. Purdyman leading the group. Now this came as a surprise to me. This is a second plaque. This plaque resides in one of the local Batavia cemeteries. When Gilbert died, his wife had two plaques made. One went into the cemetery, and then a few years later, she was buried next to this plaque, and her parents are very, very close by too. Now I haven't been there. This photo I just got off Find a Grave, but interestingly enough, the Historical Society had lost track that there was a plaque at Navajo Bridge. So it was an interesting exchange. Now this is the most recent plaque at Navajo Bridge for Leif McDaniel. He, oddly enough, is one of the early deaths of the area. So you kind of ask, gee, why did this go up now? It's kind of a long, hairy dog story, but we'll get to it. So you can see from his death certificate, you can download it on your own if you want, that he was 41 years old when he died in 1928. And here, fell from bridge, 675 feet. I think that's a little exaggeration, but I don't think it makes any difference. So it turns out that the bridge engineer, Jerry Keenan, has just published a book on the building of Navajo Bridge. First starts talking about the new bridge, then he goes back into the history a little bit of the old bridge. And he got a little outfit in Flagstaff to publish him. Just a kind of a two-horse operation, two owners, and they both acted as editors. And so one of them, Tom Martin, was editing Jerry Cannon's manuscript, heard about this story, read about it, and thought, we should put up a plaque for him. And raised the money, got some money from the Glen Canyon Conservancy, as a matter of fact. And here he is installing the plaque last year. And this little publication actually published this photo in their communications, and you can get that off the web too. So let's walk across the bridge. Let's go over to the east side. Nice views over there, Navajo side. There's an informational plaque on the left I'm not going to talk about, but there's a plaque on the right. Take a closer look at it. This is the John Deering, an important person in the Bodaway community. Of course, the Bodaway community, the Bodaway Chapter, basically had to authorize the addition of the new bridge in 1995. Actually, I want to talk more about that later. Let's ignore that for the time being. Here's John Deering's Navajo name. And you can see he was born in 1870 of the Deerwater clan. Now, in 1930, there was a census on the reservation. And all the Navajos were encouraged to take anglicized names. And Deering, who was a big deer hunter, and had connections to the Deerwater clan and so on, thought, okay, Deering, that's a good name. So he adopted the name John Deering. And here he is on the census, and his wife, including his wife, Susie, and a bunch of their kids. The list actually goes on to the next page. I think they had 9 kids now. So important, an important couple, an important family to the Bodaway chapter. Now I was lucky enough to talk once with Pauline Wilson, who's a granddaughter of John Deering. And she's had a lot of interesting roles. She's actually worked as the Park Service liaison for a while, matters between the Navajos and the Park Service. She also worked very closely with Jerry Cannon to get the new bridge project approved by the Bodaway chapter. It needed to be approved. But she also told me a little bit about her grandfather, that he was a big deer hunter, liked to go up to the Kaibab to hunt, and often took the ferry over to hunt, and then he'd bring his hides back on the ferry as well. And he worked in trail maintenance on the Dugway and on the other approaches to the ferry, and that he also delivered mail. And this is an astonishing route that he occasionally delivered mail on from Lee's Ferry up Korea all the way to Tropic. Imagine that as a mail delivery. So here's another member of the Bodaway chapter, Louis Nez, and his plaque. Here's his death certificate. He died in 1928. He was only 28 years old. And he died in the last ferry accident. So this story, like I say, he was a member of the Bodaway chapter, but he worked at Cedar Ridge at the trading post. The post was run by Royce Deans. And one day Royce said, come on, let's go for a drive. Let's go over to Kanab and do some trading. And they got in his Model T and crossed at Lee's Ferry on the ferry and drove to Kanab. I don't know if they spent the night or came back the same day, but then on June 7th, they were coming back. Royce drove his car onto the ferry. And both Royce and Lewis were sitting in cars. As a matter of fact, they sat there while the ferry went across the river. Dolph Johnson was the ferryman. Now, he wasn't very experienced. He was just filling in for one of his brothers, who was much more experienced with running the ferry. Somewhere, for some reason, the leading edge of the ferry slipped under the water, and the water came rushing over the ferry and just sucked it under, and it was gone in literally a second. And 3 men drowned. Royce's body was the only one ever recovered from that incident. And the ferry never ran again. It was still several months before the bridge was completed. Now, they still had a boat or two around, and you could get across. You couldn't take a car, you couldn't take a wagon. So that was the end of the ferry. No one saw that ferry again. It was long gone, and they never replaced it. Pardon me?
The previous,
So Louis Nez, yes.
the previous guy to this,
Yes.
where did he die at? Did he die or?
Yeah, and I've forgotten.
But he got a plaque.
It said that he was one of the workers on the bridge.
Oh, no, I think you're.
John Deering.
John Deering.
John Deering.
That's him about.
Yeah, I'm not certain, yeah, he died quite some time ago.
That he died in the Colorado River?
No,
Okay, it was a different deal.
it's just, these are people that the Bodaway Chapter
Okay.
wanted to memorial from their community on their side of the bridge. So that's all. So we're gonna go back west across the bridge. We're gonna walk past the Glen Canyon Conservancy bookstore, and we're gonna take a look at this plaque. This is a plaque to Warren Johnson, who came to the ferry in 1875, and was the ferryman for 20 years. A far more important person for the history of the ferry than Lee was. But Lee had the infamous name, and that's who he named the ferry for. Now, Emily was still at the ferry when Warren Johnson came. As a matter of fact, her helper, James Jackson, had died in 1874, and as a matter of fact, was buried in that little cemetery out of Dell, first buried. And so Warren Johnson was recruited to be her helper, and they worked well together. She eventually left in 1879. She's a very interesting character and well worth discussing, but I'm just gonna say she was a formidable person. The other thing I want to point out about this plaque is that Warren Johnson came with his two wives, Permelia and Samantha. They were close. They were very, very close. You know, polygamous wives didn't always get along. These guys did. I should say plural wives. Plural wives don't always get along. Now, there's a lot we can say about Warren Johnson. You can, if you're interested in his story, you can read it in references like this. This P.T. Riley book is a wonderful book. A little turgid. If you want something to put you to sleep, it does a very good job. If you're starting out, you want a good story about Lee's Ferry, Rusho's book is a really good place to start. I do want to talk a little bit about Warren Johnson. I just can't help myself. You can see him here in this photo with his wife Permelia and her 8 children. The 2 boys standing in the back row, those are actually Samantha's kids. Now, by the time this photo was taken, there's a lot of history here. You could talk about this photo just for an hour. Polygamy had been disavowed in the LDS church. And Warren Johnson said, what am I supposed to do? Divorce one of my wives? Well, he did decide that they should be less obviously a polygamous family. So Samantha went to Kanab to live. The 2 boys, they didn't like Kanab much. I don't know if they didn't like the school or what. They ran away, came back here. No one cared. No one paid all that much attention about whose kids were whose. But if you want to know how close these plural wives were, this is a hint. Here's their twin headstone in Kanab City Cemetery. Now, Warren Johnson has another plaque in the vicinity, not right at the bridge. You have to go over to the old Marble Canyon Lodge on the south side of the highway. And here, this is the Warren Johnson, probably the first plaque. Actually, this probably I don't know much about it, but it probably went up before the one at the bridge. And this is a plaque I'll mention in a couple of minutes for Gregory Crampton. And this is a wonderful sculpture for Karen Kazan. But if you're standing here and you turn and look the other direction, this is what you see. You see the old Marble Canyon Lodge, back when it was called Vermilion Cliffs Lodge, by the way. But Buck Laurie, that's the name Buck Laurie gave it. He built it, borrowed money, and when he couldn't pay the money back, he had to give it back. He had to give it over the hatch. His first name,
Bubbles.
Hubble, excuse me, Hubble. Hubble didn't like the name Vermilion Cliffs, took down the sign, called it Marble Canyon. A woman who was putting in her own place 5 miles up the road, and by the way, that's the highway along there, over on the right. You see the big super highway. So she had her own place just starting 5 miles up the road. She couldn't decide what to name it, but she got this sign and it's called Vermilion Cliffs. Buck Laurie's name. So this is the Karen Kazan sculpture. This is really astonishing. If you haven't seen this, go look at it. The detail is astonishing. She died in 1994. This was put up by Mordecai Roth, her stepfather. So Karen died in 1994 with her husband, Tim. Now, the Kazan name is well known. The first physician in town was Ivan Kazan. Tim was his son. And Tim became quite a river runner. Of course, obviously, Karen was a river runner in her own right. And eventually he decided he wanted to do something else besides river. He went off to seminary training, became an Episcopal priest, and was actually the priest at St. David's here in Page. One night they were driving back from Flagstaff and got hit by a drunk driver right outside of Cameron. And this is about where they died. This is just south of Cameron. You can see that river runners occasionally stop here, leave little knickknacks here. This was actually established by her father. And if you look closely at that cross, Fish and KB. Fish was Tim Kazan's river nickname, and KB is Karen Byerly, her maiden. And to this day, someone still goes out there every year and puts up a Christmas tree on that side. I think it's her father. I think her father is still.
Where is it?
It's
South of Cameron.
just south of Cameron. You can see it's still on. It's still on the area that has the
Speedy gas station.
Oh,
yeah.
Right where the speed limit changes.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Where I guessed up today.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, and it's worth just stopping and taking a look at that site. So I'm gonna go through this pretty quick. Gregory Crampton died in 1995, very fine historian. You could talk quite a bit about him, but the only thing I'm gonna tell you is that his ashes were scattered at Lee's Ferry, and he wrote a bunch of interesting books in this area. Ruscio's book, Desert River Crossings, actually, the first edition was both Ruscio and Crampton. And then a second edition came out after Crampton's death. It was just Ruscio's. But he contributed a great deal to this book. And this is a wonderful book, History Beneath Lake Powell, by Gregory Crampton. And you can see Ruscio contributed to this one.